story begins as our protagonist finds himself in a dark, unfamiliar place, wondering where he is and whether he's dreaming. Suddenly, he notices the sacred stone in his hand glowing with an ominous color, one he has never seen before. As a black feather drifts down in front of him, he looks up and is startled to see a woman with enormous black wings hovering in the air. But before delving into this encounter, let's return to the beginning. In an otherworldly realm, two powerful forces reign, demons and divine spirits. A long war raged between them, ultimately ending in the demons' victory. However, about a decade ago, the demons turned their sights toward the human world. Humanity, powerless and defenseless, seemed on the brink of annihilation as the demon armies poured forth from their gates. But then, the divine spirits appeared, instilling humans with the will to fight back and granting them divine power. Humans began to fight alongside the remaining divine spirits. Those chosen by the spirits formed pacts through sacred stones, wielding the spirits' power to combat the demons. Thus, humanity's fate rested in the hands of these hunters. In the present day, just 10 kilometers outside Tokyo, a group of hunters gathers before a gate. E-rank hunter Hino informs them that it's an E-rank dungeon and advises everyone to prepare. E-rank hunter Kamiya replies that he understands and asks if they've checked their gear and supplies. E-rank hunter Maito confirms that all the equipment is ready. They glance at our protagonist, Makoto Asuka, an F-rank hunter, who is carrying their supplies, along with extras for the group. Makoto confidently assures them that everything is in order, laughing. Kamiya comments on how much easier it is with someone to carry their gear. Maito jokingly calls Makoto a little wannabe hunter, telling him not to worry about combat and to leave it to them. Used to being called a wannabe, Makoto stays silent. For those chosen by the divine spirits, the sacred stone appears in their hands as the source of their power, and they form a pact with the spirit that appears to them. 2 years ago, Makoto received his sacred stone. Believing this made him a true hunter, he vowed never to let another tragedy occur and resolved to grow stronger. His resolve stemmed from a gate break a few years back, during which his parents were killed by demons. Receiving the sacred stone had felt like a beacon of hope to him. A year passed. In a park, Makoto was practicing, swinging his sword 1,000 times in less than an hour. Satisfied, he prepared to run 20 kilometers when a blond man noticed him and pointed him out to a friend. The friend, a man with black hair, called Makoto a fake hunter. The blond man asked if it was true that, even after 2 years, Makoto was still ignored by the divine spirits. The black-haired man confirmed, dismissing Makoto as a waste of a sacred stone, a useless nobody, even worse than an ordinary person. Makoto overheard them but continued on his way without responding. Moments later, in an alley, Makoto was thrown hard into a trash bin. A man shouted at him, exclaiming that it was impossible and asking why he had to fight while babysitting him. Makoto replied that he could fight too, saying he'd been training with weapons, but the man scoffed, saying it was pointless without a divine spirit. As he walked away, he told Makoto to stop pretending to be a hunter like them, claiming it lowered the status of real hunters. They left him alone in the cold, snowy night, near the trash, wondering if the sacred stone was supposed to be his hope. He questioned why no divine spirit had appeared for him, even after 2 years. Unable to form a pact with the divine spirit, Makoto was left an outcast, rejected by both the hunters and ordinary people. Back in the present, inside the dungeon, monsters were burning, their flames the result of Hino's lower-ranked divine spirit, Flam. Hino shouted to the team that one demon had escaped, and in response, a powerful wind arrow launched in another direction, striking the fleeing demon. It was Maito, using her lower-ranked divine spirit. On the other side, Kamiya fought a demon with the help of his lower-ranked divine spirit, Fall. Within minutes, all demons were defeated. Maito asked if that was the last of them, commenting on how easy it was, to which Kamiya responded that it just showed how strong they had become. Suddenly, Hino saw a demon creeping up behind Makoto. He shouted a warning, and Makoto turned just in time to dodge the demon's attack. Reminding himself that he was a hunter too, he swung his sword at the demon, shouting that he would take it down. His blade struck the demon, but it showed no injury, staring at him mockingly before grabbing his sword and lifting it easily. Makoto realized, as he feared, that attacks without a divine spirit's power were ineffective. The demon yanked the sword from his grip and launched its sharp claws on him. But Hino acted swiftly, using his flamed spirit's breath to burn the demon to death. Hino asked if Makoto was all right. Calming himself, Makoto apologized and thanked Hino for saving him. Hino approached him, assuring him not to worry and complimenting his movements. Shocked, Makoto explained that he'd been training so he'd be ready if he ever formed a pact. Hino nodded, saying he hoped Makoto could form a pact someday too. Surprised, Makoto thanked him, saying he appreciated the words, even if they were just for comfort. As they look at him, a creepy smile formed on their face. A moment later, they reached the dungeon's deepest area. Hino informed the team that the boss was beyond the next gate. Touching the gate, he asked Makoto if he'd heard stories about the many types of demons, some with unique routines. Makoto asked if he meant defeating demons by exploiting those routines, to which Hino confirmed, raising his hand as Kamiya grabbed Makoto tightly and aimed her arrow at him. Shocked, Makoto struggled but couldn't break free. As Hino opened the boss door, he remarked that some demons fall asleep right after eating. Kamiya then kicked Makoto into the boss's chamber, laughingly calling him food, while Makoto told Kamiya she would leave the rest to him. Trembling, Makoto sat up and shouted for them to wait. But Hino taunted him, saying that someone like him could never form a pact with a divine spirit, and that this was a fitting end for him. They closed the door, locking it from the outside. Makoto rushed to the door, banging on it repeatedly, shouting for them to open it. He cursed under his breath, realizing he had let his guard down, and questioned why he hadn't considered the possibility of betrayal. Suddenly, a loud growling sound came from behind him. Slowly, he turned around, stunned with fear as he saw the massive form of the E-rank dungeon boss, the behemoth, drawing closer. Makoto shook in terror, barely able to believe it. The behemoth swiped its sharp claws in his direction, but he jumped away just in time, sprinting while screaming as his former team laughed and played cards outside, indifferent to his plight. Hidden by smoke, the behemoth paused, confused when it saw nothing in sight, as Makoto frantically searched for an escape route. Though he knew he had no chance of defeating it, he realized the behemoth hadn't fully awakened yet and was not at full strength, offering him a small chance to escape. Spotting a narrow opening nearby, he rushed toward it, but the behemoth let out an ear-splitting roar, causing the ceiling to collapse and blocking his only escape path. Makoto stared at the rubble in disbelief, refusing to accept that his only path to survival had been cut off. He looked back and saw the behemoth charging toward him. It was too close now. Still, he clung to the hope that there must be some way out. But as the behemoth opened its massive jaws to devour him, he froze in terror, paralyzed by the sight of its enormous fangs. A surge of despair hit him as he realized he had yet to accomplish anything. He hadn't even avenged his parents. Just then, his sacred stone began to glow with a dark, ominous energy. Shouting that he would not die here, the stone unleashed an ominous shadow power that surrounded him. Black energy poured forth, shocking him as it expanded, forming a protective circle around him that caused the behemoth to hesitate and tremble in fear. In that moment, Makoto found himself transported to an unfamiliar place, questioning if he was dreaming. He looked down and noticed the sacred stone in his hand, glowing with an eerie, malevolent color unlike anything he'd ever seen. Then, a woman with vast dark wings appeared before him. She reached out her hand, calling him human and inviting him to form a pact with her. Makoto looked at her in confusion, but she urged him to hurry, saying that their space wouldn't last much longer. Standing in front of him, she asked if he would form the pact or not. He wondered if she was his divine spirit and realized that, if so, his answer was obvious. He declared that he would form the pact and fight alongside her, reaching for her hand. She accepted it, telling him that with this, the pact was complete. Dark energy flowed from her into his sacred stone, and he felt something crawling within him, realizing that this was what a pact felt like. After forming the pact, he steadied himself and faced the behemoth as the mysterious dark realm around him faded away. Gripping his sword tightly, he shouted that they were ready. The behemoth growled loudly, the sheer sound and force making him tremble, and he noted that its power seemed even greater than before. As the behemoth charged toward him, he braced himself, thinking that he was not the same as he had been moments ago. When the creature lunged, he leapt away and was astonished to find himself landing a significant distance behind it, with only a light push off the ground. This must be the power of a divine spirit, he thought. Makoto raised his sword, brimming with excitement, declaring it was his turn to strike. But he stopped short, realizing he hadn't yet learned what abilities his spirit granted him, something crucial for defeating demons. Panic seized him as the behemoth appeared behind him. He jumped and dodged, calling out to the spirit in his head, asking what her power was. A voice responded, startling him as he realized she was speaking inside his mind. She admitted she'd forgotten to mention her abilities, making him shout in frustration to focus. She snapped back, reminding him he hadn't asked, and he retorted that now wasn't the time for blame. The behemoth's claws struck the ground behind him, shattering it into fragments, but Makoto managed to leap away just in time. Remembering the shadow energy from earlier, he asked if that was her power. She confirmed, releasing dark shadows from his sacred stone, and told him that the ability was called Rebellion Shadow. She explained that this power allowed him to manipulate shadows freely, and if he focused, he would instinctively understand what he could do. Makoto closed his eyes briefly, concentrating. Dark shadows emerged from his hand, shaping into a long sword, leaving him amazed. She explained that this was a shadow weapon and clarified that for now, his ability allowed him to transform shadows into weapons. Smiling, he gripped his shadow sword tightly, thanking her and saying that this was more than enough to fight. Turning to the behemoth, Makoto teasingly asked if it was waiting for him, apologizing mockingly because he wouldn't leave any openings this time. Enraged, the behemoth swung its massive tail, hitting the ground in the process. As it's getting close to Makoto, he swiftly swung his shadow sword backward, then sliced forward as the tail came close. In a swift, powerful stroke, he severed the behemoth's tail, leaving it roaring in pain as the severed tail crashed to the ground. The behemoth glared at Makoto in fury, only to halt in shock as it noticed a dark, monstrous figure with enormous eyes looming behind him. Makoto dashed forward, determined, making it clear that he was coming for the creature this time. He swings his sword aiming for its head, but the behemoth managed to tilt its head back, dodging the attack. He was surprised that the creature gauged his attack range. Realizing this, he leapt higher, launching himself from above. The behemoth immediately jumped back to put distance between them, but Makoto extended his sword mid-air, reshaping it into a longer weapon. With this newfound reach, he slashed the behemoth's limbs from a distance. As the behemoth roared in pain and collapsed, Makoto felt a surge of triumph, noting that, just as he suspected, his shadow weapon could change shape freely. Facing the wounded creature, he leapt into the air, recalling the harsh words of his former teammates, their claims that he was a waste, a nobody, a fake hunter, someone incapable of forming a pact. Now, he knew they were wrong, reforming his shadow weapon into a massive butcher's knife. He felt as though he had been honing his strength for this very moment. With a single decisive slash, Makoto brought the shadow knife down, slicing the behemoth in half. Its massive body crashed to the ground, and he stared at it, surprised by his own power. His shadow weapon faded, and with trembling hands, he celebrated quietly, overjoyed that he had actually defeated a demon. Finally, exhausted, he sank to the ground and looked at his sacred stone, asking the mysterious woman if they could now speak. In response, shadows emerged from the stone, and the woman appeared before him. Makoto expressed his gratitude, crediting her for saving him. She simply responded that she had only lent him her power. He was the one who had done the difficult work. Shaking his head, Makoto thanked her again, deeply appreciative that she had agreed to form a pact. As she looked at him in silence, he eagerly praised her abilities. The power to manipulate shadows, he thought, was exactly what one might expect from a high-ranking spirit. Defeating an E-rank boss surely made her special, he reasoned. She paused before answering, then finally revealed that she was not a divine spirit at all, but in fact, a demon. The realization left Makoto stunned, filled with shock and confusion. Demons had destroyed countless divine spirits and pushed the human world to the brink of ruin. In response, humans formed pacts with divine spirits, becoming hunters to combat the threat. Makoto asked her, puzzled, if she was not a divine spirit but a demon, clenching her arms tightly, concern evident in her expression. Makoto pressed her, saying he needed more details, but before she could answer, the boss's room door creaked open, and voices filled the air as someone remarked that Makoto must have been defeated by now. Makoto told her team with certainty that Makoto was likely inside the boss's stomach by this point, but they all froze, surprised and confused, when they saw him standing there. Makoto furiously called out to them, demanding answers, while Kamiya stared in disbelief, asking how he was still alive, and Maito questioned him about the boss's whereabouts. Hino then shouted, realizing that Makoto must have formed a pact. Kamiya, suddenly worried, asked Hino what they should do. Hino cursed, knowing that if Makoto reported what had happened, they'd be in serious trouble. The three hunters activated their divine powers, aiming them at Makoto, as Hino shouted that they had no choice but to eliminate him. Stunned, Makoto shouted back, asking the woman's name. Caught off guard, she stammered as she introduced herself as Rinoa. With resolve, Makoto told her that was enough for now and requested her power once more. Rinoa, stunned by his determination, agreed. Summoning his shadow weapon, Makoto formed a sword. Hino, attempting to rally his team, dismissed Makoto as a weakling and urged them to finish him quickly. Just then, Hino's divine spirit, Flam, interrupted, asking if Hino truly planned to fight that thing. Surprised, Hino asked Flam if it was scared, but Flam warned him, calling him a fool for not noticing the abnormality of Makoto's divine spirit. Makoto's divine spirit, trembled, admitting it had never seen anything like it before, while Kamiya's divine spirit, Fall, remarked that Makoto's pact was on a completely different level, leaving Kamiya in disbelief. Hino, now alarmed, asked Flam what kind of spirit Makoto had formed a pact with. Flam explained that it wasn't clear who she was, but she wielded the strength of a top-class divine spirit, shocking everyone. Makoto glanced at Rinoa, realizing what this meant. Divine spirits were classified into ranks, lower, middle, upper, and top class, with only a rare few reaching the highest level of strength. These spirits were known as the strongest among their kind. Curious, Makoto asked Rinoa who she truly was, but she gestured ahead, saying there wasn't time for explanations. Following her gaze, he saw Hino preparing to attack, Flam surrounding him. Hino shouted, refusing to believe he could be weaker than a worthless loser, and reasoning that since Makoto's pact was freshly made, he was still weak, with only the boss as his first real opponent. Maito hesitated, noting that while hunters did grow stronger by defeating demons, there was still uncertainty. Kamiya added that if Makoto had truly formed a pact with a top-class spirit, they wouldn't stand a chance. Hino, furious, called his team cowards and leapt forward, dashing straight at Makoto with Flam surging around his fist. Shouting that he would show Makoto the power of a true hunter, Hino swung his fist, but Makoto waited calmly for the strike to approach before sidestepping it with ease. Hino attacked again, throwing a series of flaming punches, but Makoto dodged each one effortlessly, barely breaking a sweat as he anticipated each move. When Hino's fist came close to his face, accompanied by the skill Flam's spirit breath, Makoto swung his shadow sword forward, slicing cleanly through the flames. The sight left Hino and the others in shock. Makoto taunted Hino, asking if he was holding back, which only fueled Hino's anger. Enraged, Hino shouted at him not to get cocky, calling him a weakling who had only gotten lucky by forming a pact with a powerful spirit. Makoto gritted his teeth, responding that what he had gained wasn't luck, unlike them. He hadn't given up despite how long it had taken him to form a pact. Enraged, Hino cursed and released a powerful burst of flames, shouting that he would burn Makoto to ashes with his secret technique. He urged his team to fight alongside him, reminding them that if they didn't finish Makoto now, they were finished. Trembling, Maito activated her divine power, reluctantly agreeing that they had no choice, while Kamiya, equally fearful, cursed under his breath and joined in. Hino activated Flame Spirit's Roar, Maito activated her Water Spirit's Grand Archer, and Kamiya summoned Thunder Spirit's Great Spear. Together, they unleashed their special skills in unison, causing a massive explosion that shattered the ground and sent up clouds of smoke and debris. As the smoke cleared, Maito asked nervously if they might have gone too far, while Hino laughed triumphantly, declaring that, in the end, trash was still trash. But as the dust settled, their expressions changed to disbelief. Makoto stood there, unmoved and unscathed, calmly explaining that he had cut through all their attacks and that the boss's speed had been far more formidable. He took a step forward, closing the distance, and asked if they were now prepared to face him. Hino froze, fear seizing him as he glimpsed Rinoa's intense gaze within Makoto. Summoning his courage, Hino created a flame and warned Makoto not to mess with him, hurling fireballs his way while calling him a pathetic wannabe hunter. Makoto bent low, dodging each flame as he advanced swiftly toward Hino. As he closed in, Hino, panicked, tried to say something, but Makoto hides his shadow weapon, then launched a punch directly at Hino's stomach, sending him flying back and leaving him coughing up blood. Looking down at him, Makoto stated firmly that he was a hunter. Hino slammed into the ground near his teammates, trembling before he collapsed. Makoto coldly ordered them to take Hino and leave, warning them not to speak a word of what had happened. In a panic, Maito and Kamiya quickly grabbed Hino and fled, fear evident in their eyes. As the dust settled, Makoto's sacred stone glowed, and Rinoa appeared, remarking with a soft smile that she couldn't believe he'd resorted to punching Hino. He replied that cutting him down hadn't been necessary, thanking her for standing by his side in the fight. She smiled warmly at him, and he reminded her that they were in the middle of an important conversation. She nodded in agreement as he asked her to explain how she was not a divine spirit, but, in fact, a demon. With a serious expression, Rinoa clenched her hands tightly and replied that she understood, preparing to tell him the truth. Rinoa explained that she was once a divine spirit of the angel race, but due to a certain event, she fell from grace and became a demon. She looked intently at Makoto, who listened in surprise, reflecting on the significance of her words. He knew that angels were a high-ranking race among divine spirits, but he had never heard of a divine spirit turning into a demon. She went on to explain that the reason she, a demon, could form a pact with him was due to her former status as a divine spirit. However, the reason her sacred stone had ended up with him was a mystery, and everything about their situation felt irregular. Makoto responded that he understood her predicament. Rinoa then admitted that, no matter how hard she tried to conceal it, she could not change the fact that she was a demon. If he wished, she offered to terminate the pact immediately, saying he shouldn't hesitate if he felt uneasy about it. As she said this, she tightly gripped her arm, trembling slightly, which didn't escape his notice. With a sigh, he sat down beside her and introduced himself properly as Makoto Asuka, an 18-year-old hunter. Surprised, she asked why he was introducing himself now. He replied that he knew she wasn't a bad person, so he had no intention of canceling the pact. This left her stunned, but he explained that this was his way of showing he was counting on her from now on. Speechless at first, she then smiled, saying he was a strange person, but that if he was fine with it, so was she. He smiled back, stood up, and began to walk out of the dungeon, suggesting that they head back together. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, two demons were observing Makoto and Rinoa from afar. One remarked that, just as expected, the fallen angel had betrayed them. His comrade dismissed the concern, saying that even if the winged insect had turned against them, it made no difference to their plans. With a smirk, the first demon added that he found the whole situation amusing and had thought it would be at least somewhat entertaining. Later, in Tokyo, Makoto arrived at his small apartment and opened the door to room 303. He told Rinoa it was his home and switched on the lights, revealing a modest room with just a bed, a table, and a few boxes. He invited her to sit wherever she liked. She glanced around and sat beside the table, remarking skeptically that it was hard to believe humans actually lived in such places. Makoto asked if something was wrong, to which she replied that it reminded her of the caves in the demon realm, merely a place to keep out the wind and rain. He explained that it was simply a place to sleep, and asked if there was anything she particularly liked. She looked puzzled, and he clarified that it could be anything, even an object. After a moment of thought, she replied that she enjoyed beautiful scenery. Noticing her gaze out the window, he suggested that they add some flowers to brighten the view, thinking they might look nice there. She responded warmly, saying he had good taste and that flowers were a lovely idea. Makoto then proposed that they buy a new flower each time they cleared a dungeon, an idea that brought a smile to her face. Yawning, he admitted that he was exhausted from the day's events and thought he'd go to bed early. As he moved toward his bed, Rinoa approached it and asked if it was indeed where he slept. He nodded, saying he was going to change into something more comfortable. She lay down on the bed, commenting that it seemed a bit cramped for two people. Startled, Makoto's face flushed as he asked if she actually planned on sleeping together with him. Rinoa asked if it wasn't customary to sleep together, mentioning that, in the angelic realm, sharing a bed was the norm. Makoto, surprised, asked if divine spirits even needed sleep outside of their sacred stones. She admitted that she didn't think she could, so he suggested she return to the sacred stone to rest. She agreed, retreating to the stone with a quiet goodnight. Makoto looked at his sacred stone for a moment, then lay down on his bed after tidying up. As he settled in, he wondered what he should do from here, considering the risks if people discovered his pact with a demon. He decided he would have to operate solo and resolved to start with an F-rank dungeon, the only level he could reliably clear on his own. The next day, at the Japanese Hunter Association headquarters, Makoto walked inside, his sacred stone concealed within his gloves. He asked Rinoa if she felt any pressure, and she replied that she was fine, agreeing it was wise to keep the purple stone hidden since it would draw attention. He approached the counter to make a request, informing the assistant he'd be taking on an F-rank dungeon. Just then, the room erupted in gasps and murmurs as people noticed a man entering the building, a rare and striking presence. The S-rank hunter Amagi Yugo strolled in, holding a bottle of alcohol and declaring that there was nothing like a drink to wake up. As he took a sip, the crowd shrank back, slightly stunned to see their idol drinking in the middle of the day. Several hunters rushed forward, asking for autographs and photos, while Yugo, amused, noted that things were as lively as usual. But then his gaze landed on Makoto at the counter, and he looked surprised. Makoto recalled that Yugo was an S-rank hunter, wondering if they had just made eye contact. Yugo smiled and approached him, stopping to ask for his name and rank. Unsure, Makoto confirmed that Yugo was indeed speaking to him, and Yugo remarked that it had been a while since he'd spoken to someone who wasn't a girl. Makoto introduced himself as Makoto Asuka, an F-rank hunter. Yugo acknowledged this with a nod, but seemed doubtful, asking if he was really an F-rank. Confused, Makoto asked if Yugo needed anything from him. Yugo replied that he didn't, then turned to the assistant, apologizing for interrupting, and charmingly suggesting they go for tea sometime. As Yugo left, he called over his shoulder that they would see each other again, leaving Makoto wondering if Yugo had just been flirting. The assistant was left flustered, barely able to speak. She marveled at the fact that Yugo had spoken to her, asking if it had all been a dream. Makoto, equally baffled, brought her back to his request, which she processed quickly, still in shock. He left the counter, pondering why someone as famous and powerful as Yugo would approach him. The assistant returned with the coordinates for the gate, thanking him for his patience. He thanked her in return and left, smiling as he resolved to stay focused. This would be his first solo dungeon clear, even if it was only F-rank. Later, he arrived at the dungeon's location and confirmed it was the right place, checking his coordinates one last time before stepping inside. Once within, he noticed the unusually heavy atmosphere of the dungeon. Rinoa's voice echoed in his mind, as she asked if F-rank demons were indeed considered the weakest, to which he replied they were, and he asked if she sensed anything unusual. Suddenly, he heard the rapid approach of something large and, on instinct, activated his shadow weapon skill, forming his shadow sword to block an incoming attack. However, the force was overwhelming, and he was thrown back, though he managed to recover without serious injury. Rinoa checked if he was okay, and he confirmed he was, though shaken, and asked what had hit him, noting its incredible speed. He then recognized the creature, a chaos wolf, and froze, asking if they weren't D-rank demons. Rinoa replied that, at the very least, it was not a bottom-tier demon, suggesting that something was wrong with this dungeon. Makoto began to wonder if he had mistakenly entered a D-rank dungeon. Wolf surrounded Makoto, and he glanced to the side, confirming that the gate was sealed. Rinoa remarked that he understood the gravity of the situation, and he replied that, in his current state, handling all of them at once would be tough. Steeling himself, he extended his sword's length, prompting Rinoa to retreat to the sacred stone to avoid distraction. Forcing himself to stay calm, Makoto decided to analyze the situation later, focusing now on reducing the wolf's numbers. He leapt forward, aiming to take out a single target with precision, but before he could strike, another wolf lunged at him from behind. He sidestepped just in time, only for another sharp claw to swipe at him from behind. Tilting his head forward, he barely dodged it and sprinted out of range. Bending down to stop himself, he found the wolves surrounding him once more. Observing their coordinated movements, he realized this trait was particularly vexing and quickly began searching for a way to break through. One of the wolves charged at him with jaws open, aiming for a bite. Makoto raised his sword to block, but a second wolf struck him from the side, knocking him off balance and sending him sprawling onto the ground. As he lay there, he noted their strength and precision, realizing they coordinated to attack the moment they detected any opening. He started to wonder if there was any way to defeat them. Inside the sacred stone, Rinoa observed his struggle, deep in thought. She encouraged him, saying she was considering an idea and suggesting he observe the wolves' movements closely. As the wolves drew closer, glaring at him with intent, a risky plan took shape in his mind. He decided to try it, even though he knew it was dangerous. Deactivating his shadow weapon, he raised his hand deliberately, exposing himself to create an opening. Rinoa was alarmed, realizing that this move could easily cost him his life if it didn't work. Seeing an opportunity, the wolves charged at him simultaneously. Just as they closed in, Makoto reactivated his shadow weapon skill, forming a sword that extended into the open mouth of one wolf. With a swift, forceful slash, he cut through that wolf and downed 2 others in a single strike. Taking out 3 wolves at once, he looked at his sword in awe, relieved that his quick reactivation had worked. Rinoa reappeared, commending him for his strategy in deliberately creating an opening to lure the wolves and eliminate them all at once. Collapsing to the ground, Makoto admitted he wasn't entirely sure it would work. Rinoa then asked why this dungeon seemed far stronger than anticipated, as it clearly wasn't an F rank. Makoto agreed, concluding that it must be a D rank dungeon, far tougher than what he was prepared for. Acknowledging the difficulty, he stated that with his current abilities, a D-rank dungeon was a real challenge. But since he'd already entered the gate, Rinoa continued that the only way out was by defeating the boss. Makoto agreed, realizing he had no choice but to press on and face whatever awaited him deeper in the dungeon. Both Makoto and Rinoa froze in shock as they sensed something approaching, a new swarm of wolves. Frustration welled up in Makoto. He had just managed to defeat 3 of them, and now there were even more. Rinoa returned to the sacred stone, reassuring him that things were different now than before. Curious, he asked what she meant. She instructed him to raise one hand forward, focus on shadow chains, and target one of the wolves. He did as she instructed, and shadow chains emerged from his hand, wrapping around the wolf's body. Rinoa explained that this was Shadowbind, an ability that restrained enemies. Thrilled to have a new skill, Makoto pulled the chain, dragging the bound wolf toward him and cutting it in half with a single strike. Stunned by the effectiveness of the ability, he barely had time to react as another wolf lunged at him from behind. He quickly used Shadowbind again, wrapping the chains around the wolf. Grabbing the chain with his other hand, he hurled the wolf around, smashing it against other wolves. Realizing the versatility of the binding ability, he formed his shadow sword and used Shadowbind on the next approaching wolf, exclaiming to Rinoa how incredible and easy the ability was to use. She agreed, praising his skill but cautioning him that Shadowbind consumed a lot of magic, so he should use it wisely. He acknowledged her warning, saying that with this new power, he could keep pressing forward. A while later, he planted his shadow sword into the ground, relieved that the battle was finally over. Reflecting on the large number of wolves he had just defeated, he noted with satisfaction that he wasn't even tired. Rinoa reminded him that hunters grow stronger the more demons they defeat, explaining that his stamina was evidence of this progress. Makoto looked down at his hands, feeling a surge of pride as he recognized his growth. After a brief rest, he nodded to Rinoa, signaling it was time to move on. As they continued, Rinoa silently observed his rapid development. She realized that, despite his limited experience with demons, his physical abilities, mental strength, and quick thinking had allowed him to adapt quickly, filling her with excitement for what lay ahead. After a short while, Makoto reached the dungeon's deepest area, where the dungeon boss awaited. He stared at the massive gate, hesitating slightly. Rinoa, sensing his tension, appeared beside him and asked if something was wrong. He explained that it was a hunter's duty to clear dungeons since only a hunter could unlock the door to the boss. Admitting his fear of facing a D-rank boss, he also confessed his excitement at the chance to prove himself as a real hunter. Rinoa reminded him that this was only the beginning, and he agreed, determined to make it out alive and continue his journey to become a hunter who could one day save the world. With newfound resolve, Makoto grasped the gate and pushed it open without hesitation. Stepping inside and closing the door behind him, he looked up and saw the towering form of the D-rank dungeon boss, a hell scorpion. Its massive stinger poised as it growled in fury at his arrival. Makoto trembled as he observed the hell scorpion's tough, mineral-like outer shell, wondering if it was harder than metal. Rinoa, sensing his fear, asked if he was scared. He replied that he was fine and chalked it up to babble jitters. Just then the scorpion lunged, striking the ground with its tail and leaving a deep crater where he had stood moments before. Makoto moved to the side, noting the precision and speed of its attacks. A direct hit would be fatal. Suddenly, it thrust a massive claw toward him, but he managed to block it with his shadow sword just in time. Leaping onto the scorpion's arm, he slashed down, but his attack left no mark, confirming his suspicion about its tough armor. The scorpion whirled around, searching for him, and Makoto retreated to a safer distance. He resolved to dodge and analyze its movements, knowing that even the strongest armor might have weak spots, likely around its joints or the base of its limbs. Rinoa watched quietly from within his realm, observing his strategy. Makoto attacked again, focusing on its arms and tail, but his strike still failed to make a dent. Gathering all his strength, he plunged his sword toward its head, yet it barely scratched the surface. In response, the scorpion released a powerful roar that sent a shockwave through the air, forcing Makoto to cover his ears against the painful vibration. Then, in a startling move, the scorpion's tail transformed into crystal-like spikes, which it launched in his direction. Makoto sprinted backward, feeling the sharp crystals graze him as he dodged, shocked to discover that the creature also had ranged attacks. He wondered anxiously how he could possibly win against such a formidable opponent. Desperate for guidance, he asked Rinoa for ideas. She replied that, as things stood, it was nearly impossible for him to damage the scorpion effectively, implying he'd have to push beyond his limits. Just then, the scorpion charged at him, and he quickly reacted, using Shadowbind to chain its arms and swing it hard into the wall, causing the entire cave to shake. Makoto knew that had he been hit, it would have been fatal. As the scorpion turned back toward him, he noticed a crack had formed on its head, sparking a realization. Blunt force, not slashing, might be the key to breaking through. The scorpion screeched in fury and launched another sharp claw in his direction, but Makoto leapt away in time. It attacked again, even more fiercely than before, and he dodged with a sense of urgency, realizing that its movements were becoming increasingly aggressive and relentless. Taking stock of his options, he considered changing the size of his sword, but recognized that slashing attacks wouldn't help him in the first place. Determined, he focused on creating a new plan, one that would rely on blunt force to exploit the crack he had just discovered. Rinoa called out to Makoto, reminding him of the first time he'd used his shadow weapon. He realized what she was hinting at, recalling how he defeated the previous D-rank boss. Smiling as he understood, he watched as the scorpion lunged both claws at him, attempting to crush him. He jumped just in time. Rinoa warned him that he couldn't dodge its attack in midair, and, as expected, the scorpion released a barrage of crystal spikes in his direction. Instead of evading, Makoto activated Shadowbind, wrapping chains around the scorpion's body. He then pulled himself closer, shielding his head from the spikes as he closed in. As he neared, he transformed his shadow weapon into a massive hammer and swung it down with all his strength onto the scorpion's head. Relieved, he sighed as the scorpion finally fell still, defeated. Rinoa, admitting that she'd been stubborn by not giving him a direct hint. He replied that they were both equally stubborn. She emerged and explained that the shadow weapon could form more than just swords. Grateful for the hint, he joked that a direct answer would have been easier, but Rinoa reminded him that realizing things himself was part of his growth, an essential skill for the future. Agreeing, Makoto acknowledged it had been a valuable experience. Rinoa added that unexpected challenges helped him grow, and hinted that it would be beneficial if they happened regularly. He laughed awkwardly, hoping they wouldn't be that frequent. The next day at Tokyo's Hunter Association, the assistant bowed repeatedly, apologizing and admitting the mistake regarding the dungeon's difficulty. Makoto reassured her, saying he'd learned a lot from the experience and there was no harm done. She thanked him for his understanding and informed him that his reward would be transferred to the account he provided, asking him to confirm the amount. Shocked, he stammered upon seeing the payment of 1,500,000 yen, asking her to verify if it was correct. She confirmed, explaining that solo clearing a D-rank dungeon warranted a substantial reward. She then addressed him as Mr. Hunter, which took him by surprise, and he smiled, accepting the acknowledgement with pride. As he left the building, he excitedly told Rinoa that they should buy some flowers for their apartment as planned. Rinoa agreed, and he thought he could easily afford a beautiful bouquet now. Just then, he noticed someone passing by, a familiar presence that made him pause. The woman called his name, and he turned to see his childhood friend, Ruka Kazane. With a bright smile, Kazane greeted him, commenting that it had been a long time and asking how he'd been. Makoto told her he'd finally made a pact with a divine spirit and was working hard, which prompted her to approach him in surprise. She congratulated him warmly, acknowledging the effort he'd put in over the years, and he shyly thanked her. Around them, passers-by gathered, recognizing Kazane as the young hunter who had risen to D rank in record time. They whispered in shock, questioning why someone so accomplished was speaking to that wannabe hunter and speculating about their connection. Sensing Rinoa's curiosity, Makoto scratched the back of his neck nervously. He explained to her that Ruka Kazane was his childhood friend and a talented hunter, known for her potential. As far as he knew, though, she had an intense hatred for demons. Kazane had been Makoto's childhood friend. They had always played together, and even as they grew older, their bond remained unchanged. But then came the day when demons rampaged across the earth. During the chaos, a group of demons chased Kazane and her older brother. Her brother, sensing the danger, turned back to hold the demons off, urging Kazane to run. She hesitated, wanting to stay, but he insisted, telling her that she at least had to survive. With courage, he faced the enormous demon alone, but the creature's power was far beyond that of any human. Kazane could only watch in horror as her brother was killed before her eyes. 2 years ago, around the same time, both Kazane and Makoto received their sacred stones. Makoto had apologized to her then, admitting that his divine spirit still hadn't appeared. Even though they had promised to fight together, it seemed unlikely he'd be able to fulfill that promise. Kazane, with an emotionless expression, told him she understood, but that she couldn't afford to wait. She turned and walked away, joining the Hunter Association without him. In the present, sitting together in a cheerful cafe, Kazane beamed as she told him the parfait here was the best. She also praised him for solo clearing a D-rank dungeon right after forming his pact, to which he reminded her that he was still an F rank. She brushed it off, telling him it was impressive nonetheless, and that he was living up to his name, Makoto. But her curiosity soon turned to his divine spirit, and she eagerly asked what kind of spirit he had formed a pact with. Makoto froze, unsure of how to respond. Rinoa chimed in, saying she could appear at any time, but Makoto whispered that it might cause complications. Thinking quickly, he explained to Kazane that his divine spirit was a bit shy, making introductions difficult. Kazane looked puzzled, asking if divine spirits could even be shy. Rinoa muttered in frustration that she wasn't shy at all, and Makoto told her to hold back, saying it was a complicated situation. Kazane then raised her own hand, revealing her sacred stone, and offered to introduce her divine spirit first. With a soft glow, her upper-ranked divine spirit, Wave, the wind spirit, appeared. Bowing politely, Wave greeted Makoto with respect, to which he replied with surprise, marveling at Wave's formality and poise. Kazane then asked if he planned on taking a rank reassessment soon, and he replied that the next date was still a while away. She encouraged him to keep training in the meantime and suggested they tackle a C-rank dungeon together. Surprised, Makoto told her the gap between their strengths was too great at the moment, and he would only hold her back. He also worried about revealing Rinoa's identity, but Kazane simply smiled, reminding him that he used to lead her when they were young, and now it was her turn to lead. Her warm, reassuring smile silenced his doubts, and he agreed, recalling that they had promised to fight together. Despite the risks, he couldn't turn down the opportunity to grow. More than anything, he was happy to see Kazane's joy at the prospect of finally going on a mission together. Later, in the Tokyo Hunter Association building, the first conference room was filled with high-ranking officials discussing their main topic, the Majin. One man reported that these beings with humanoid intelligence and a rank or higher power had long maintained a low profile. However, recently, at least a dozen hunters had fallen victim to them. Survivors recalled their battles against the Majin vividly, as their strength was truly exceptional. Kimuro, the president of the Japan Hunter Association, listened and then laughed, commenting that if he were in his prime, he would have hunted them down himself, though age was proving inconvenient. Mishima, the section chief of the gate management system, scolded Kimuro, reminding him that this wasn't the time for such talk. She added that the management system she developed indicated that all gates were being properly cleared. The man continued, explaining that, according to survivors, the Majin had appeared after the gates had been cleared. This confused Mishima, who asked what purpose they served if they emerged post-clearance. Just then, Yugo entered the room, apologizing for being late. Mishima, furious, reprimanded him for his tardiness, but he brushed it off with a comment about her beautiful face, further irritating her. After the report concluded, Yugo remarked that he understood the situation and might have an idea about it. Mishima warned him not to invent stories, but he confidently assured her to leave it to him, mentioning he had some free time. Kimuro expressed his confidence in Yugo's abilities, entrusting him with the task, which Yugo accepted before leaving the room. As he exited, Yugo thought about Makoto and pondered whether his own prediction about him might prove correct. Meanwhile, at an abandoned building, Kazane and Makoto stood before a C-rank dungeon gate. Kazane asked if he was nervous, to which he admitted he was, knowing they were about to face higher-ranked demons. He also worried about Rinoa's presence and how it might affect Kazane, given her history. Sensing his tension, Kazane gave him a reassuring pat on the chest, telling him not to worry as she would protect him. He smiled, thanking her but adding that he intended to prove he wasn't just there to be protected. Together, they entered the gate, where 2 C-rank demons awaited them. Makoto activated his shadow weapon, intending to assess the situation first. But before he could act, he felt a powerful gust of air beside him and saw Kazane charge forward, her spear thrusting with incredible force into a demon's head, causing it to explode. Stunned, he watched as Kazane, with an intense expression, stated that all demons needed to be eradicated. He noted the emotion driving her, far beyond what he had expected. Kazane walked back toward him, mentioning that she sensed a demonic presence nearby. She then turned to him with a piercing gaze and wondered where the presence is coming from. Panicked, Makoto realized that he might have been discovered right from the start. Makoto quickly deactivated his shadow weapon, and as the energy faded, Kazane glanced around, noting that she thought a demon had escaped. However, she reminded him that the demonic presence she had sensed earlier was real, urging him to stay alert, which he agreed to. He guessed that Kazane possessed a heightened sensitivity to the magical energy emitted by demons and had likely picked up on the shadow magic. Rinoa agreed, commenting on Kazane's intense hatred for demons. Makoto confided that he wanted to explain the situation to Kazane, but, after witnessing her reaction, felt increasingly worried. A short while later, they reached the dungeon's middle area, where a swarm of demons launched themselves at them. Kazane immediately activated her wind spirit's mantle, kicking the demon to the ground before effortlessly slicing it in half with her spear as she hovered in midair. She quickly stabbed another demon, then spun her spear in a wide arc, slashing through several others around her. Makoto watched in amazement, noting her ability to fly using the power of wind. Charging forward, he took on one of the demons on the ground, announcing to Kazane that he could handle things down below. He countered the demon's hand with a swift elbow, then swung his sword to slice it in half, shouting to Kazane to leave the ground to him. Although the C-rank demons were naturally stronger than those he'd faced before, he felt his own strength had grown. Switching his shadow weapon's form into a gun, he fired repeatedly, taking down demons from a distance. Kazane observed, stunned by the transformation of his sword into a gun, marveling at the unique versatility of his ability. Soon after, they wiped out the remaining demons in the middle area. Kazane landed gracefully and smiled, complimenting him on his performance, saying he was more than holding his own against C-rank demons. He appreciated her encouragement. She looked him over, remarking that although she'd sensed a demonic presence from him earlier, she didn't feel it now, so it was probably nothing. He acknowledged her sharp detection skills and felt relieved they hadn't been discovered. However, his relief was fleeting as he questioned how long he could keep hiding the truth. Deep down, he knew Rinoa wasn't an ordinary demon. She was his reliable partner. But Kazane's hatred for demons seemed boundless, leaving him clenching his fists and wondering what he should do. A moment later, they arrived at the deepest part of the dungeon. Kazane pointed out that they had reached the boss's lair and asked if he was ready to focus. Though he stammered a reply, the truth was that he was anything but calm. Sensing his anxiety, she guessed that he was nervous because it was a C-rank boss, a higher rank than they'd previously faced. He admitted this was part of it, but as he was about to explain further, she cut him off, reassuring him that it was okay because he wasn't alone. Extending her fist, she encouraged him to go all out. Makoto smiled, deciding to save the difficult conversation for after the battle. Bumping her fist, he thanked her and resolved to fight by her side, ready to face the challenge together. Makoto and Kazane entered the boss room together, immediately feeling the overwhelming presence of the C-rank dungeon boss, a towering cyclops. Kazane activated her wind spirit's mantle, declaring that she would eliminate any demon in her path. She dashed forward, spear in hand, as the Cyclops lifted its massive wooden hammer to counter her. Makoto quickly used Shadowbind, wrapping chains around the Cyclops club just in time to hold it in place, allowing Kazane to strike with her spear. Enraged, the Cyclops shattered the chains and swung its hammer toward her. They both shouted to signal each other and dashed forward in unison, slashing the Cyclops from opposite directions, causing it to roar in pain. Makoto noticed their attacks were perfectly timed. They leapt to opposite sides again, each targeting the Cyclops' legs simultaneously. Kazane smiled, realizing they were both instinctively switching positions to keep the Cyclops off balance, as if they shared the same strategy. As the Cyclops screamed in agony, Makoto used Shadowbind to restrain it once more, shouting to Kazane that, now weakened, the Cyclops was easier to bind and urging her to finish it off. Thanking him, Kazane unleashed her divine power, activating her wind shower skill. The wind-powered attack struck the Cyclops, creating a loud explosion that left Makoto in awe. Running back to him, Kazane praising their teamwork. Blushing, he returned the gesture, realizing how seamlessly they worked together. This level of synchronization felt natural with Kazane, but he reminded himself there was still more work ahead. At that moment, Kazane's wind spirit, Wave, appeared, complimenting them on their teamwork. Kazane proudly replied that their years of friendship made them an unstoppable team and that this partnership could take them anywhere. Makoto swallowed nervously, approaching Kazane and admitting that there was something he needed to tell her before they continued. He began to remove his glove, preparing to reveal his sacred stone, when a sudden, loud crack echoed through the room. Both turned toward the source, wide-eyed, as they saw a gate forming. A foot stepped out from the crackling gate, followed by a hand with sharp claws. A demon man emerged, smiling as he looked at Makoto, announcing that he had finally found him. The demon approached with a broad smile, exuding an intense malevolence that made Makoto tremble, realizing this being was on a whole different level from any demon he'd faced before. He wondered if this was one of the humanoid demons. Sensing his fear, Kazane gently pushed him back, then confronted the demon, asking if he was Imagine. The demon confirmed with a smirk, introducing himself as Grom. Kazane muttered that the rumors of Imagine appearances must be true, and warned Makoto that if they tried to fight Grom, they would both be killed. She insisted that she would distract Grom while he escaped. Makoto protested, saying they had to find a way to escape together, but she told him it would be enough if he survived. Kazane activated her wind spirit's mantle and charged at Grom, thrusting her spear at him repeatedly with impressive speed. But Grom effortlessly dodged her strikes, taunting her by saying it looked as if she were moving in slow motion, which only fueled her frustration. Meanwhile, Makoto could tell that Kazane was fighting at her peak, yet Grom's movements and power were on a completely different level, leaving him frustrated by his inability to see any opening to assist. Grom eventually caught her spear, pulling her closer, and teasingly declared he had her now. He slashed at her with his sharp claws, but she quickly flew back, barely dodging the attack. Regaining her distance, she called upon her divine spirit, Wave, to use their secret technique. Wave responded with an acknowledgement, and Kazane raised her hands, activating Milestone. She unleashed green wind tornadoes directly at Grom. Makoto hastily transformed his shadow weapon into a shield to protect himself from the force of the attack as Kazane hovered in midair, catching her breath. When the dust settled, Grom emerged unscathed, amused, saying that for him, her attack felt like a gentle breeze. Seething with anger, Kazane gripped her spear tightly. Grom, noticing her fury, commented on her evident hatred for demons. She simply retorted that she intended to kill every last one of them. Smiling slyly, Grom asked if she truly intended to kill all demons, and hinted that perhaps she didn't know everything. Confused and irritated, Kazane demanded to know what he was talking about. With a wicked grin, Grom pointed at Makoto, revealing that he had formed a pact with a demon. Kazane landed, shaken, and rejected the idea, telling Grom it couldn't possibly be true. Grom maintained his taunting smile, confirming his words. Kazane shouted that there was no way Makoto would make a pact with a demon, and if it were somehow possible, he wouldn't keep it a secret. But her confidence faltered as Makoto remained silent, and she demanded he deny it. Frustrated, Makoto knew he couldn't hide the truth any longer. He took off his gloves, revealing his sacred stone, and commanded Rinoa to come out. Rinoa emerged from the stone, and Kazane stared in disbelief, stunned to see a demon appear from a sacred stone. Makoto hoped to explain Rinoa's unique situation, thinking that if Kazane could understand, perhaps things would be all right. He opened his mouth to speak, but Kazane raised her spear in rage, demanding to know why he would form a pact with a demon, insisting that it was wrong and utterly inexplicable. Kazane shouts at Makoto that she could no longer trust him, and reminding him that demons were their sworn enemies. Makoto urged her to wait and calm down so they could talk, but she refused to listen. Furious, she turned her rage toward Grom, hurling her spear at him and declaring that she would start by eliminating him. Grom easily grabbed her by the neck, squeezing until she coughed in pain. Just as he raised his fist to strike, Makoto's shadow chain shot forward, wrapping around Grom's arm and halting the attack. Makoto demanded that Grom stop, but Grom freed his fist with ease, laughing as he taunted Makoto for finally deciding to step in. Grom flung Kazane aside dismissively, muttering that he couldn't care less about her. Makoto caught her before she hit the ground, realizing she had fallen unconscious. Apologizing softly to her, he laid her down gently. Grom then turned his attention to Makoto and Rinoa, pointing at Rinoa and sneering as he addressed her as a fallen angel. Rinoa coldly replied that she'd never wanted to hear his voice again. Makoto, puzzled, asked if they knew each other. Rinoa explained that when she first fell from grace, the Majin had tried to claim her, but she'd escaped when the opportunity arose. Makoto nodded in understanding, realizing the danger she had narrowly avoided. The Majin, after all, were intelligent, malevolent demons. Grom continued, saying that even though Rinoa was once a divine spirit, to the Majin she was just another number. Rinoa retorted that she had no intention of joining demons and that they would always be her enemies, causing Grom to laugh. He asked if she didn't desire revenge against the divine spirits who had abandoned her. Furious, she told him she had no interest in revenge and ordered him to be silent. Grom, ignoring her protest, offered her the freedom to kill as many divine spirits, humans, and demons as she pleased if she joined them, claiming that a demon should live according to its nature. Rinoa tried to refute him, wanting to declare herself an angel, but she faltered, feeling a surge of pain and anguish instead. Tears filled her eyes. Makoto stepped forward, declaring to Grom that Rinoa was different from the rest. Confused, Grom asked what he meant by different. Makoto explained that if a demon was defined as a being who harmed others without reason, then Rinoa didn't fit that description. He described her as kind, pure-hearted, and his dependable partner, which left Rinoa stunned and deeply touched. Grom sneered, calling Makoto a pathetic weakling who was spouting sentimental nonsense. Disgusted, he mocked Makoto's sentimentality and camaraderie, vowing to crush it all. He challenged Makoto to entertain him, his malevolent gaze fixed on them both. Gripping his shadow blade, Makoto faced Grom with fierce determination. Fueled by Rinoa's anger and their shared resolve to stand against him, Grom stretched his body casually, a smug smile on his face, while Rinoa warned Makoto that defeating him was impossible. However, she pointed out that Grom's overconfidence and complacency could be exploited to create an opportunity for escape, which was their only realistic option. Grom leapt forward suddenly, dashing toward Makoto with astonishing speed. Startled, Makoto barely managed to raise his sword in defense, only to feel Grom's presence vanish and reappear behind him. Grom's powerful kick struck his stomach, sending him flying into the wall. Makoto coughed in pain as Grom leisurely approached him. Makoto quickly summoned his shadowbind to restrain Grom's arm and foot, then shifted his weapon into a gun to fire at him. But Grom effortlessly broke free of the chains and met the incoming shadow bullets with his bare hands, catching each one mid-air before casually tossing them to the ground. With a teasing smirk, Grom remarked that it would have been more fun if Makoto had thrown them back at him instead. Grom taunted him, asking if he was already out of tricks, fueling Makoto's frustration at being toyed with so thoroughly. Meanwhile, as the battle continued, Kazane stirred, regaining consciousness. Her vision focused on Makoto fighting Grom, his body battered and bleeding from severe injuries. Alarmed, she sat up in a panic, only to notice Rinoa standing behind Makoto, assisting him in his attacks. Her heart sank as she clutched Makoto's coat tightly, questioning how he could have made a pact with a demon. Overwhelmed, she felt like she could no longer trust anything. Grom delivered another brutal kick, this time to Makoto's side, then followed up with another to his stomach. He shouted at Makoto, calling him weak and declaring that his struggles were pointless. Despite the overwhelming pain, Makoto forced himself to sit up, then slowly stood, trembling but resolute. He admitted to Grom that he was weak and couldn't compete with him, but he refused to give up. His defiance stunned Kazane. Her mind drifted to a memory from years ago, about a week after her brother's death. Makoto had come to her room and gently told her that her mother was worried about her, mentioning that she hadn't eaten for 4 days. She had sadly confided in Makoto, saying that nothing seemed to matter anymore. Makoto had silently approached her, patting her back softly, and told her not to give up. He had reminded her that giving up would mean truly losing everything. He confessed that he had also felt despair when his parents were killed, but realized that survivors like them had a path ahead of them, one they could only find if they kept looking forward. He had urged her to live and never give up. Tears welled in Kazane's eyes as she recalled his words. Thanks to Makoto, she had been able to move forward and find strength again. Snapping back to the present, she watched Makoto struggle to block Grom's next attack with his sword, only to be overpowered and thrown aside again. Grom mocked him, saying that high spirits alone weren't enough. Yet, despite his trembling hands and bruised body, Makoto pushed himself to his feet once more, declaring with unwavering resolve that he wasn't giving up. Kazane tightened her grip on his coat, her heart heavy with emotion. She realized that Makoto had always been like this, straightforward, strong-hearted, and unrelenting. Even if he had made a pact with a demon, he was still Makoto, and nothing about his core had changed. Kazane shouted at Makoto, urging him not to give up. Her words made him look back, and she reassured him with a soft smile, expressing her belief in his ability to succeed and encouraging him to do his best. Encouraged by her support, Makoto responded with a smile. As Grom charged at him, warning him not to be distracted, Makoto managed to block the attack with his sword, surprising Grom. Holding his ground, Makoto reflected on how much Kazane had suffered and how she still placed her trust in him. This trust gave him renewed determination. He leaped into the air to dodge Grom's follow-up attack, vowing internally that he couldn't afford to fall here. He struck back, swinging his sword at Grom, who dodged the attack but noticed an increase in Makoto's speed. Makoto launched another strike, aiming for Grom's eyes while declaring his resolve to survive and return. Grom tilted his head to avoid the blow, but a scratch formed on his face and blood splattered onto the ground. Makoto quickly distanced himself, noticing Grom's brief moment of shock. Kazane, watching from afar, was amazed that Makoto had managed to wound the demon. Grom licked the blood from his face and expressed amusement at the injury before deciding that the fight had gone on long enough. He began to accumulate a surge of dark power, which he referred to as a parting gift for their afterlife. The oppressive magic caused Makoto to tremble, leaving him questioning the nature of such violent energy. Turning his attention to Rinoa, Grom addressed her and demanded her return to his side, implying that compliance might spare her allies. He also hinted at Makoto's imminent demise if she refused. Rinoa looked at Makoto, who reassured her with a calm expression. She responded to Grom, firmly rejecting his offer and emphasizing her refusal to submit to a demon alongside Makoto's. Grom, unfazed, declared their end and unleashed his doom of the underworld attack, a powerful wave of dark magic. The group braced for impact, feeling a sense of hopelessness as the attack approached. However, just before the attack reached them, a radiant yellow light appeared, forming a massive hole that absorbed the dark energy and caused it to vanish without a trace. The unexpected intervention stunned everyone, including Grom, who demanded an explanation for what had just occurred. Before Grom could act, a hand rested on his shoulder from behind. A calm but firm voice informed him that his actions wouldn't be allowed to extinguish the hope for a brighter future. When Grom turned to face the source, he was met by a confident individual who introduced himself as Amagi Yugo and suggested that Grom should prepare to face him next. Yugo assured Makoto that he had done well and should leave the rest to him. As Yugo stepped forward, Makoto felt the overwhelming presence of an S-rank hunter, realizing just how powerful Yugo truly was. Grom acknowledged Yugo's strength, though his tone carried a hint of arrogance. In response, Yugo nonchalantly threw his alcohol into the portal and, with a calm demeanor, admitted that Grom was indeed stronger than him, an intentional provocation that visibly irritated Grom. Yugo then stated that he needed to repay Grom for injuring his junior hunter, unveiling his special class divine spirit, Nova. Grom crouched into a fighting stance, taunting Yugo and questioning whether his confidence was just talk. He lunged forward, throwing a powerful punch, but Yugo caught the attack without flinching. Calmly, Yugo reminded Grom not to touch his face, calling it one of his assets for business. Effortlessly, Yugo tossed Grom aside. Before Grom could hit the ground, a spatial rift opened behind him, pulling him in and spitting him back out in front of Yugo, who welcomed him back with a smirk. Yugo followed up with a punch to Grom's stomach, sending him crashing into the wall. He remarked on the dissonance between Grom's confidence and the reality of his situation. Meanwhile, Rinoa explained to Makoto that divine power was particularly effective against demons, noting that Yugo's divine spirit power was wrapped around him. However, she admitted that the sheer amount of power he wielded was beyond normal. Grom, angered by Yugo's casual demeanor, summoned dark energy and attacked. Yugo remained unmoving, calmly releasing his sky piercer, which consumed and neutralized Grom's attack, preventing it from exploding. Shocked, Grom watched as Yugo manipulated the residual energy, compressing it until it detonated within the confines of the sky piercer. Although Grom managed to escape, the explosion shattered one of his arms. Makoto, witnessing the ease with which Yugo countered the demon, concluded that Yugo was overwhelmingly strong. Yugo, laughing, commented on Grom's narrow escape, noting that the injury was severe and suggesting Grom should use his full strength. This mockery infuriated Grom, who unleashed his power in a furious attempt to kill Yugo. Before the battle could escalate further, another demon appeared. Halting Grom's attack and surprising everyone present, Grom identified the newcomer as Fane and demanded an explanation for his presence. Fane chastised, warning that using such power in his current condition would result in his death. Turning his attention to Yugo, Fane acknowledged his strength and speculated that if they fought, neither would emerge unscathed. Yugo agreed, conceding that Fane looked formidable. Fane declared the battle a draw and turned around, advising a strategic retreat. Grom protested vehemently, refusing to back down, but Fane silenced him with an angry rebuke, forcing Grom to comply out of fear. As they entered a gate to leave, Grom threatened the group, vowing to return and kill them all, urging them to prepare for their demise. As the gate disappeared, the dungeon fell into an eerie silence. Everyone stood in stunned disbelief. Breaking the silence, Yugo asked if the demons had truly escaped. Makoto stepped forward, bowing deeply to Yugo and expressing his gratitude for the timely assistance. Yugo acknowledged the thanks with a casual response and suggested they talk as they headed back. Later, during their conversation, Makoto hesitantly asked Yugo if he had suspected from their first meeting that Makoto might have a contract with a demon. Yugo, taking another sip of his drink, admitted that he had. He explained that he suspected there might be a connection with the demon, which was why Grom had been following Makoto. Yugo then turned to Makoto and Kazan, casually asking if they had reconciled. The question startled both of them. Kazan replied that she had come to realize Makoto hadn't changed. But as she glanced toward Rinoa, she added that trusting Rinoa was an entirely different matter. Rinoa, unbothered, told Kazan to decide as she wished. The tension between the two women became palpable, prompting Makoto to panic as he tried to defuse the situation. Yugo, observing the interaction, pointed out that Rinoa, as a former spirit with traits resembling a demon, would play a critical role moving forward. He reassured Makoto, saying that he accepted both Rinoa and Makoto's humanity. Hearing this, Makoto felt relieved and grateful for Yugo's understanding. With newfound determination, Makoto ran ahead and stood before Yugo, confidently vowing to become much stronger than he was now. His bold declaration surprised everyone. Yugo smiled, dashing past Makoto with lightning speed, and replied that he looked forward to the day they could fight side by side. A short while later, atop a skyscraper, a plane landed on the rooftop to retrieve Yugo. After completing his report about the demon activity, Yugo informed Kimuro that the demon threat would likely remain dormant for now. Kimuro thanked Yugo for his efforts and assured him that entrusting the mission to him had been the right decision. Kimuro then shifted the conversation, asking if Yugo remembered Himuro Yusei, the former A-rank hunter. Yugo confirmed, recalling that Yusei was the infamous criminal who had killed several hunters after being dismissed for misconduct. Kimuro explained that Yusei had recently been in custody but had suddenly disappeared, leaving Yugo visibly shocked. Yugo remarked that the situation had become a mess, but admitted he couldn't assist immediately, as he had other matters requiring his attention. Instead, he offered to recommend 2 promising hunters from his side, promising to send over their data for Kimuro to review. Kimuro agreed, stating he would look into it later. Ending the call, Kimuro turned to a man sitting at the desk nearby and apologized for the delay. He then invited the man to speak. The man, identified as Yusugi Aoji, a former disciple of Himuro Yusei and an A-rank hunter, declared his intent to put an end to Yusei's heinous actions once and for all. Years ago, Aoji was with his master, Himuro Yusei. During a conversation, Aoji expressed his desire to excel as a hunter, emphasizing his commitment to performing his duties perfectly. Yusei, however, dismissed his seriousness, calling him too stiff and saying he didn't want a boring disciple. With a playful jab to Aoji's back, Yusei urged him to enjoy being a hunter, reminding him that becoming one had taken effort. Aoji maintained that fulfilling a hunter's responsibilities should always come first, but Yusei interrupted, stating that if Aoji intended to be his disciple, he needed to let go of rigid formalities and stop striving for perfection. Instead, Yusei encouraged him to pursue his ideals, advising him to avoid becoming a puppet of the association, which he deemed worthless. When Aoji reluctantly acknowledged this but added that he could never become like Yusei, Yusei accused him of being cheeky and asked if he was mocking him. In the present, Makoto and Kazane were on their morning run around a pond. Kazane brought up the flower shop Makoto had visited after their dungeon expedition, and Makoto explained that it was because Rinoa enjoyed pretty things. He added that the room felt livelier thanks to her presence. Nearby, a man on a bench idly wondered how many laps the two had completed. Curious, Kazane asked what else Rinoa liked besides flowers. Makoto hesitated, suggesting she ask Rinoa directly. Rinoa, overhearing, flatly replied that she didn't have any particular likes, prompting Kazane to urge her to be more friendly since they were on the same team. Rinoa reminded Kazane that it was she who said she didn't trust her, brushing off the comment. Frustrated, Kazane raised her voice, voicing her dislike for Rinoa's attitude. Makoto, attempting to mediate, requested they get along, but both women simultaneously told him to stay out of it, leaving him resigned. As they continued, they overheard a couple discussing the recent news about a criminal hunter who had escaped from prison. The woman expressed fear after learning about it, while her boyfriend suggested they head home. Makoto turned to Kazane, asking if she knew anything about the escapee. Kazane confirmed that the criminal was Himuro Yusei, a former rank hunter who had been highly skilled. She wondered aloud what could have driven someone of his caliber to commit such heinous acts. Makoto's phone buzzed with a notification. Checking it, he found an email from the Hunter Association. Kazane, noticing the same on her phone, read the message alongside him. It was an emergency summons from the association, and she commented that it seemed both of them had been called. Makoto speculated that it was likely due to Yugo's recommendation and questioned what was going on. Kazane simply suggested they head to the association to find out. Soon after, they arrived at the Tokyo Hunter Association building and were directed to conference room number 5. A man entered shortly after and greeted them, introducing himself as Hayashi from the Abnormal Measures Division. Hayashi thanked them for coming and explained that, based on Yugo's recommendation, the two of them were being entrusted with the search for Himuro Yusei. Both were visibly shocked by the assignment. Hayashi elaborated, explaining that while the police were actively investigating, the Hunter Association needed to act as well. He mentioned the possibility that Yusei could be hiding near the closest gate to the site of his escape. As hunters, their task would involve tackling and investigating a C-rank gate. Hayashi asked if they had any questions. Makoto raised a concern, pointing out that Yusei was a former A-rank hunter. He expressed doubts about their ability to handle such a powerful opponent on their own. Hayashi reassured him, revealing that they wouldn't be working alone. An A-rank hunter had also been requested to assist them. Hayashi informed them that the third member of their team should be arriving soon. Moments later, the door opened, and Kazane stood up in surprise upon seeing Aoji. Aoji greeted her, commenting that it had been a while since they last met. Once Hayashi confirmed their team was complete, he bowed and excused himself, directing them to review the documents on the table for further details before leaving the room. Kazane remarked to Aoji that it had indeed been a long time since they had cleared a gate together, to which Aoji agreed. Makoto observed Aoji with a sense of awe, recalling that he was the only prodigy of their generation to achieve a rank status. He extended his hand to introduce himself, expressing his admiration and pleasure in working with someone so remarkable. However, Aoji didn't shake his hand, merely introducing himself as the former disciple of Himuro Yusei. Makoto awkwardly lowered his hand as Aoji bluntly stated that he had no intention of teaming up with them, shocking both Makoto and Kazin. Kazin stammered, questioning why Aoji wouldn't work with them and insisting that teamwork was essential. Aoji, unfazed, picked up the tablet on the table and dismissed them as potential hindrances, reiterating that he didn't need their assistance. That's all for today, guys. See you on the next upload.